So, yeah, as soon as my slides are advancing, I can start.
Now, can I? Yes. This is presentation, yes. No, it's not.
So, but this advancing, let's see, how do I advance it then? Huh.
No, it's another screen. А как остановить демонстрацию экрана? Таня, можешь подойти, пожалуйста? Почему-то я не вижу здесь кнопки.
То есть я попробую. А мы вышли, что ли, из этого?
Нет. Что?
Sure that slides can be advanced. It was working. Мы вышли из зума. А вот сейчас опять вошли.
Наверное, может, вот это вот она презентация. Наверное, вот она презентация.
Okay, good. We're good.
So you watch big school. I will briefly introduce you in Russian, because just to save time. Дорогие коллеги, начинаем сегодняшнюю серию с небольшого опоздания. Мы будем наверстывать общее название.
I'm sorry, you should to
Первый доклад профессор Kari из университета Аляски Fairbanks с докладом о языке и народе Dena'ina, который живет на берегах Левого Буга, как о самом особенном выдающемся среди языков автохтонной семьи или семьи Dene. Профессор Kari занимается языками этой семьи в течение многих десятилетий, уже 50 лет, и он расскажет о своем опыте, уникальном опыте работы с языками данной группы. Ну, я не буду больше занимать времени. I won't take more time. I just announced that you've been working on the languages of the Dene family for 50 years, and you'll share with us your experience in that unique area. Please.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be in Moscow and to be invited to the conference that's happening next week. We have about 6 or 7 Alaska papers on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And this is a picture I took in August at Californsky Village. There's a typo here. There's a K, it's Californsky, and I left the K out. But that's, this is the Dene or language family on a map that I make and I use. I change it now and then because the language names change. But this is the current name of languages. And I don't believe the laser printer works too well on the screen. But it's the largest language family in North America in area. And they've generally had neighbors all around them. There's this Apache languages in Navajo in the Southwest, and in the West Coast, north of San Francisco, Mendocino County, up into Oregon. There used to be about 18 small languages there. And then the northern languages. These languages are famous for their verb complexes and their complexity, but mostly I'm talking today in the first part here about Dena'ina, my early work. This is the Cook Inlet Basin here. And lately I'm using 10 sections to group the place names. What really works for place names is to maintain drainage place name lists. And the geography is especially important, and it's auto-instructional. These are the world's, really great foot travelers, pedestrian foragers who walk in the Alaska range. And so Californsky is there by that number 10 with the K there. And that's where that picture was taken in about August 14th in the summer on a beautiful evening. And the name of that village is Uhlanesditnu, and that means the farthest stream over. And I'm going to point this syllable out later in the talk, but that is cognate with certain stems in the Yenisei in Siberia. And here is in May or June of 1972, and that's Peter Californsky, his little shack, he called it. And I just decided I want to live and work in Alaska at that time. And I've worked with 8 or 9 of the languages, and the essential fundamentals of my work are dictionary files, and with a consolidated root morpheme format and cumulative place names list. And I have other interests in texts and vocabulary. This is April 1st, 1976. And maybe I should walk over here in advance of the slides. But this was a very special time to realize how much the Dena'ina people were really supporting the language work and coming up with these great, all the strongest speakers wanted to be involved. And this is Albert Rossui was really a good writer of Dena'ina. Oh yeah, then I need the microphone over here. But this is Peter Californsky. This is Sava Stepan. This is the great Shem Pete. And I guess I'm about 27 years old at the time. 27 years old at the time. And they themselves were sort of unifying about that time where they themselves were sort of unifying as the Dena'ina. This is the Wrangell map of 1839. So having a stronger identity, science, research. And this is the Wrangell map, and it's a very interesting map up to about the 58th latitude, 65th latitude, but not higher, not further. Not higher, not further north. And Adeline, when she talks, is going to be talking about northern Alaska, the talk after me. I can interpret these. I can interpret these. This is like Ben-Deal Bennett. Ben-Deal Bennett. Most of these names are the earliest native stations. They're written like this. Volcan here is Wrangell volcano, and here's the church and the name for Kenai. They read out at St. Nicholas in Kahnu. But I'm leaving copies of the map as well as paper copies and digital copies that you can have, some of which are in this portfolio of mine. This is Radloff and Schiefner. 1874, and it was a very good compilation of word lists, in some cases going back to Rezanoff, 1805, and Doroshin in the 1830s and 1840s. And I was using this right away in the 70s, and look at this. Here in the Kenai Peninsula in 1874, there's a name for California Indians. and it's Dena'ina. And of course, I was re-eliciting these, and they had ethnonyms for the California Indians because of the Fort Ross colony that was there from about 1820 to 1840. In fact, that picture of them playing that hand game, the calls in the game were from California Indian languages. Dena'ina is the most exotic Dene language for its well, various features. So these were from the Dena'ina Topical Dictionary, and I numbered them, and so like Fox Island Aleutians. This is quite interesting. This is going down toward the Aleutian chain, and it's where did it go? Dachjuna, and essentially the Aleuts are pronouncing it as a Dena'ina place name. That means Dachjuna means murky water people. So the Aleut country has a Dene place name within it. And this third paper on Tuesday is about this issue of Dena'ina influence on Aleut that has to be pretty old, 3,000 or 4,000 years old. So this is not advancing. Let's see. Let's see, can you advance it manually? But anyway, I've been the Alaska Native Language Center used to publish a lot of small publications, and from let's see. Yeah, this word for cardiac, that's ushchanag. That's a word for an adversary, an ancient people, and it's sprinkled within the place names. There's those people had territory further up in Cook Inlet, and it appears that the Aleut language extended into Cook Inlet thousands of years ago, before the Dene moved in. Gee, I'm sorry, there's even one or so things. Wait, this is my notebook adapter. I thought I hadn't brought this.
Okay, try to change the slide now.
It's way.
So this controls the mouse. Let me try switching these here. So I couldn't see this, but this is my piece of equipment here.
Where can I
put it in there?
Yeah. No. We should. No.
It works here, but it doesn't translate to.
Can you advance the page, man? Page that one. quite no. Well, I do. Oh, wait, that works. Okay. All right, here we go. So this is the 2003 Dena'ina topical dictionary. And what's especially unusual are the marine shellfish foods and animal names in the language because they are on Cook Inlet. And this is really a fully illustrated topical dictionary. I think it's the most interesting one for any Alaskan language. And you have these situations like these are the razor clams that can get 4 and 5 inches. They're really large. And when they call it Kai's in, that's like something is there, or it's a situation, it's happening, and it can, but that's simply who's on an object is there over a space. And that's an innovation for the razor clam. This is the butter clam, and the name for that is chokosh. And chu is water, I mean beaver, and kosh is it's cut and opened up. And so the butter clam is being compared to a beaver carcass that's been gutted. And all these things are really kind of interesting about the only Dene on salt water. One of the things that Dena'ina is famous for is its esoteric vocabulary. And this is the word for water, which in Navajo and most of the languages is tu. It's just a stem. But instead of saying that, they use that in compounds too. They have this word mithni, vinthni, withni. And Albert Wasserly, I mean, why are they using this word for water? Well, it's esoteric, it's different, it's humorous if you're a Dene speaker, and it does appear to be based upon the stem where water flows, and it's like flowing in it or something. That was Albert Wasserly's idea, but everybody notices nobody else uses this word for water, but it's not a substrate non-Dene language, and it's not Aleut, and the language is peppered with these. The next to last speaker on Wednesday, his name is Will Norton. He's going to talk about this in Dena'ina, and it's very distinctive. So here I go to Mira and Andre's slides they sent me in 2022 that they presented at an event here. And it's very interesting that Ninilchik is, the name Ninilchik is Yu.Knorozova, and they have shared Russian and Dena'ina words. In Dena'ina, like in Ninilchik, they say kajna for lynx, which is a Dena'ina word. They say dayashi for wind-dried fish. They say chokhayin for fermented fish. And they borrowed some Dena'ina words. And at the same time, the Dena'ina are using a lot of Russian in their language. And it's especially Peter's younger sister, Fedosia, was a speaker of this Kenai Peninsula Russian. And I never taped her speaking it, and I only heard her speaking it conversationally one time. And in 1981 and 82, we were really going after these obscure words. And she passed away in April of 1982, but she was really a Kenai Russian speaker as a second language. And your text didn't show up here, but this is called, they borrowed the Russian word for that. What is it? Puchka. Puchka. Yeah, they borrowed the word for Russian for this plant, and they would have adopted Russian uses of that plant too. And at the same time, now is on that map, like the Wrangell map that we showed, it is there, and that's a Dena'ina word for a structure. The structure extends like a main permanent house. We're going to talk a little bit more. Oh, look at that. See, I didn't realize that this is your PowerPoint here. So there you go. See, I didn't forget about that. So this is, and I think Mira and Andre and Marina's work is really well received, and it's really, those people are mostly fairly fair skinned, but they're prominent. They're a mix of a Lutic, Eskimo, and Dena'ina in the original Russian colony that was there, that was started in the late 1820s. So here's some examples of things from the Russian loanword compilation, and some of them are really probably pretty removed from Russian that you know. And so even about 2 weeks ago, I did a new version of this and sent it to Mira and Andre, and maybe I sent it to you, Marina. And this is a work in progress, but it's really interesting. Here's the steam bath switch, binik, but then they'll name it for species. So shishkona, binik, zilbini, binik, lache. They name other plants that become a Russian Dena'ina compound. And, or these interesting things for Orlok, the one for like bottle, different types, Kais in Bidulga. That's funny. Those razor clams, when you cut them open, they have this little cylinder that's clear, and they call it the clam glass. And so they call it Kais in Bidulga, that when you're cleaning the clams. So lots of interesting things. And we come up with a source for makula. Mira is saying this is the strangest word in all of these. So we're talking about 715 Russian loanwords, many of which have 3 and 4 dialect variants, and many of which start compounding with others. And then another 100 or so are other languages. And that gets very exotic for older borrowings. This is a really lovely map. In that cardboard portfolio, we could tape this up to the wall. And there's some blue tape there, and you'll see this map there. Is that piece of paper right here or not? It's right there, but you'll see it. And for Andre's book that came out, we did an analysis of this names on the map, and it's really, really interesting to talk about in terms of the Dena'ina names that are on here. And I'll be giving you a TIFF file of the map too. And I was going to talk about some of the details there, and I was going to open it up as a PDF so we can zoom in on it. But with this to give you an idea, I mean, this, like they call this creek Stavisky Creek for little old man, but it's Tuchtasinta. And then the current goes against it. But then you see the Dena'ina naming a point and a stream. This is that's Deep Creek, and the notes of Deep Creek. And this is perfect transcription of Chanichak. And that means like a deep ravine. So it's there's a great deal of bilingualism between Russian and Dena'ina taking place.
And Woznessensky collected some beautiful artifacts from way up here on Deustubernet or Tustamanna Lake. This is very isolated. There's no road going up there today. But this, like Peter Kalifornsky, so Kalifornsky Village is on this map right here with a cross at 1.3. But his people would hunt up there. And so there were some good-sized villages up there headed to Tustamanna Lake. And look at this detail for glaciology and for geomorphological purposes. And if we take a little time, I can give you files of these maps. How's our time right now?
You can go for 15 more minutes, I think.
Yeah, this is showing some correlations with the Woznessensky map, and this is my database of the Dena'ina names. And so in 1991, Peter published his collected writings, and it's still, this book still is in print. And he'd write things one time, and we'd work on the translation, but he would never change them. He just wrote a draft one time. And he's really, posthumously, or after he's gone, is a pretty well-known writer because he had no particular training, wasn't coming out of university. And I think, yeah, so this is a picture of Peter's mother. And so Peter was born in 1911, and this is his older sister, Mary, and they're two of the, and Peter is buried at Kalifornsky Village. And so I go back to the original slide. This is this little stream. And this is Gasilatnu, and Gasilatnu is the name Kisilov. And at times we thought that was some unknown substrate, but it's really an Aleut origin name combined with the Dena'ina name for stream. So it really does reflect the Aleut Dena'ina boundary. But this in so this is in August, and Peter's grave is right here. And I took this picture, and it's the first time I saw surfable waves at this little creek. And I grew up surfing, and if somebody could ride those little waves, it might have lasted for a half hour. But so Ed Vida, and I'll be talking more about him. And he's the one who proposed the Dena'ina same hypothesis. In 2013, he was saying that this stem mist here is potentially cognate with the NSA root for ace, for open space, and that also means the god of the sky in NSA. And Ed proposed that, but he hasn't brought it up again lately. In this year, in this new dictionary, I quoted Ed saying that God of the skies is potentially related to this ness on its steepness. And it hasn't, so the two of us are both saying this is potentially a Dena'ina same cognate. Now I'd like to change to the first few slides I'm going to use on Tuesday in a different PowerPoint briefly. And in that rolled map tube back there, which that tall tube we brought up, you see that? Which one? The one? The 30, yeah. I'm going to give you a map of Glacial Lake Adeline, and if you, yeah. When we open this up, I'm going to leave this here, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to show you, this is a geological map from 1987 with some, and I'm going to take it here, it's square, it's 36 by 36 inches, and it has 600 and it has about 675 place names in the basin of this giant glacial lake, the largest glacial lake in Alaska, and the lake breached and changed drainages in the 11th millennium, in about a 300-year period. The fourth talk on Friday is about glacial lake Dene, and I'm going to have not that one. No.
Is it this?
No, it's not that either. But that's
This one? No.
that's Adeline's project.
This one.
No, that's her poster. But the one I want to read is I read about 3 of them. And so this is my present to you guys. And let's put it here. And
I will do it. I will do it.
so there's multiple copies. So this one, oh, that's a nice thing too. It's an augment or Dena'ina placement place. This is really exotic. And then I'm going to ask, I'm going to do.
Oh, we'll do it. You continue. I will do it. You will start with others out.
There's one corner here. I'm going to ask you to pick out a name, okay? And this is like a game show. So you point your name. There's 675 names in this lake basin, and they all the Ottoman names are fully etymologized, but each pick out like kind of a long name. Okay, that's Ottenok Bennett. That's actually the name for glacial lake Ottoman. So that's the whole mega feature. Try it and just pick out another one. Okay, this is Hezrat Lu, and this is a glacier, a big glacier that runs into Taslina Lake. And Hezrat, there's a word for pus and grease. It's greasy pus. They call that glacier. And then there's a set of them, so that's Hezrat Nok. And this is in the Matanuska River here. Pick out another one. Okay, this is Sosnu Bennett and Etot. This is Sosnu Bennett Etot, and that's Sand Island Lake headwaters. Now, what I may mention rather briefly is this slides around glacial lake Dene. This is the very head of the Susitna River, and the lake that's up here, it's called Summit Lake, is Sosnu Bennett too. There's 2 duplicate names and at the heads of each drainage, the lakes have the same name. Now, if we can go a couple of slides down here, and this is how I'm starting this thing, and this is about the 2008 Dena'ina Symposium, but I won't discuss that now. And this is our 2010 volume. How many of you are familiar with the 2010 Dena'ina papers? Any of you?
I doubt that.
Is the book pretty hard to find? Yeah, it's still in print. It only costs $40. And it's underutilized. And these are part of what we're talking about on Tuesday, the Dena'ina hypothesis in 2024. And I have this theory of a slow chronology that Ed Vita and I and Mike Fortescue have been debating. And I said in 2010 that I think that Dene entered Alaska 14 to 13,000 years ago, and there's such a thing as a slow chronology and slow language change. And these names are fully etymologizable when many of those were coined at 11,000 years ago, many of them. So this is about the Fortescue Vita 2022 book. And they say that their proposal, because of the cognates being found among NSA and Dene, are really pretty robust. They must have come after the Bering Sea breach, say 5,000 years ago. Well, there isn't really any evidence to support that, but it's good for making an argument. So here, Fred Ewan here on Memorial Day, he was about 199 years old, and he's pointing to Net Yesa. And this hill complex is on that map there. That means land ridge or the world ridge. And I proposing that a small group of Dene men, maybe 6 or 8 men, named these 11,000 years ago. And this was this big island right at the outlet. So this is Wrangell Mountain. Can we get rid of that thing there? But this is a nice picture of the Wrangell Mountains, which is a massive shield volcano. And the name is Kastani. Kastani is very ambiguous, and it has multiple readings, but is cause, and Tani can punt on things like happening and visible and being seen and activity, and it implies that it is the center really of the weather system. And it's a beautiful name that's has multiple meanings. And you know, how old is that name? Well, it's got to be as old as the other oldest ones. And so the next slide is one I can perhaps end with here. Yeah, there's one more, I think.
Give it a try. No.
But I have a 2019 article called "The Net Yesa Ensemble" and geolinguistic evidence of Dene presence at high water levels of glacial Lake Adeline. And I present it with 67 place names that are from the Tanana Valley in Copper River, where you can see there's some duplication and movement. You can sense the direction of, yeah, okay. Now this is fun. So here, this Saiva, I figured is where they started this walk. And this is about 80 kilometers there. But I figured that some small bands were coming from two directions. This is Dena'ina, which is Tyone River. And I've added this one, which was not in my 2019 paper, but there's a Tanzai and a Tanzai Devalaya. There's for example, this is amazing. Natara's Ada is called Devil's Canyon, And this is the western edge. It's about 20 miles of boulders, and they call it Natales Ada, and that means torrential current flows down. And then this one, which is down below, and this is the last breach in the glacial ledge. Down there, it's called Bear Canyon, Natales Ada. So how many millennia separated the coining of those names? You know, I would consider this one of the newer ones down here, as it would have been accessible. But the like I said, Sasnu Dene, you know, is at the head of the Golcana River, and this Sasnu Dene that our student picked out is at the head of the Susitna River. This is the Susitna drainage. So tomorrow, I mean not Monday, Jared Smith's paper and Garrett Rubik's paper are going to have a little more on glacial Lake Ottman. And that's a good point to stop if we can take any questions about the story that we're starting on.
Yeah, we can use like 10 minutes for questions and discussion. And in the meanwhile, I would ask colleagues from here to set up the next presentation so that we don't waste time. Is it okay?
Yeah, happy
okay,
to take
please. So please, questions, comments. You have received a lot of information about the area that is not particularly familiar to all of you, but you understand how much knowledge Jeff Kari has about this remote area, and use this chance to ask some clarification questions, please.
And I will ask a very stupid question in a way, because I'm supposed to know this, but just to make it clear, is my understanding correct that the age, this huge millennia that separates us from these place names, depends on the time when the ice was coming, going away, right?
Yeah.
So the people could not name these places unless they were already free from ice. Yeah.
Well, there's lots of areas of these. The margins of the glacial Lake Ottman have 2,500 years of archaeology before the lake dropped. There's over 2,000 years of sites, and this is the Dena'ina Valley drainage, and it's pretty clear that the Dene had established themselves in the Dena'ina Valley drainage robustly 13 and 14,000 years ago, and Copper River maybe a little bit later. But there's archaeological evidence in various maps, including one that's very experimental that we didn't put up. And Jared Smith was combining, well, anyway, any further?
I mean, that was the correct idea. So you related to the time when the ice would go. Does it mean that there, you said 14,000 from now, then it will be just the end of the last glacier period, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
But the names look the same, even if they're 2,000 years old or 100 years old. And there are very few historic, post-historic names. And some of them, they look like other Ottman names.
But how do you know?
Well, the thing is, the names are vital for orientation, and there's evidence that they just retain names. They aren't waffling about it, or when you can check older maps, almost invariably you can figure out how to transliterate them. And the Dene are world-class foot travelers, you know, including Adeline's late father. So they're famous for, and also, when was the snowshoe invented? I get into that subject in the dictionary, but this advanced Dene snowshoe is credited to being an early Athabascan invention, but you can't find 1,000-year-old snowshoes, or they're never preserved. But the snowshoe had to be part of this mystery of the prehistory. And
please, Dene.
What
has been the native reaction to your work with all these words and your references about prehistory?
Well, it's I say I'm saying this. I'm confident in what I'm saying, and you can quote me on this. It's obviously, well, they're saying our people have been here for 10,000 years, and we know that. I mean, the chiefs, is it 10? Or even in Amazing Grace. Yeah, well, it goes well with Amazing Grace. That yes, we've been around when we've been here for 10,000 years. There's toponymic evidence to support that. There's not much publicity. I don't like publicity. I haven't seen a newspaper journalistic write-up of this that Kari has proposed this. The article has been out for 5 years now, and it hasn't received much attention, but it fits in with other, very much so, like when Ben Potter will be talking on Tuesday about the earliest archaeology and the genetic evidence that shows relationships between Alaska and Siberia in terms of genomic evidence.
Уважаемые коллеги в Zoom, может быть, у кого-то есть вопросы?
Пока что ваш вопрос.
There were examples of words that were connected to different plant names and, for example, boil, but isn't there a pattern, or were they just long in connection to various areas?
Well, yeah, all the trade goods, the technology, olive oil, what was that, Pargansky Masla or something like that. And Lydia Black used to enjoy some of the old trade items, and that were used and their briefcase, Chubadan,
And if I may add, and also things that are related to Orthodox Christianity rituals. So basically, it's something about the routine items to the Russian Lord and Church.
I'd like to make sure we're set up for the right.
We're waiting for a technician to come and help, so we still have some time to continue discussion. Please feel free to ask a question in Russian if you want. Можно по-русски.
Нет, есть компьютер, есть.
Если кто-то предпочитает.
Может быть, можно тогда воспользоваться компьютером Zoom, да.
Ну да, просто хотелось бы параллельно, пока мы продолжаем задавать вопросы, чтобы кто-нибудь занялся этим, чтобы не было большого перерыва. Если вы можете, то, конечно, да.
Да, понимаете, подключенность к проекту.
Вот компьютер, он для сюда переключился. Его надо тогда перекоммутировать на...
Будем параллельно. Okay. Any more questions? They will figure it out. Take some time to connect for presentation. Does everybody
know the history of Fort Ross and the reason why Peter Raboff got his name. Is it generally known in this audience? I see major specialists in Fort Ross history there, Alexei Stovich. Jim, you might be interested in meeting him. He has been researching history of Fort Ross.
Показ презентации, тут надо находить escape. Нажимайте. А может быть, нужно нажать escape. Can you go press escape? No, this is здесь Zoom. И видите, здесь нет презентации. Потому что мы отсюда вышли. Теперь можно ставить флеш. Сейчас, к сожалению,
Present day, how many persons?
Well, there's a pretty good educational effort to keep the arena, and a lot of people involved, but the native speakers of it are few in number, and we have a great archive holdings of storytellers. I think the best document in the last
Если вы не то можно здесь.
We have a really large dictionary. I haven't completed two.
Exactly the title of
people seem to enjoy learning the grammar and abbreviations.
Yes, it's on the presentation.
The Dena'ina identity is really strong.
Не помню, как раз нахожусь. Я не знаю, честно. И вообще ничего не могу сказать. Я могу сказать, что есть иностранцы на английском языке. Да.
So I like this.
Надо отсоединить компьютер с джином.
But it's okay.
PowerPoint is also described
Because when this lady, her daughter,
that's what I think. Otherwise, I know how to point is on my computer.
I gave her a number and she asked for it. Paid me with this. It's symbolic, you know, so I like it. It's simple.
Maybe I'll start introducing you now. So we're gradually moving to the second part of the session. Now I'll speak in English. I'll introduce Adeline Peter Raboff. And this is a fairly rare case where we have a visitor here in Moscow for pure Native American descent. She is from the Witching Athabascan tribe in the northern part of Alaska. She grew up, as I understand, in a fairly traditional setting, and then she was the old kind of experiences associated with the dominant white American society and different educational situations, various schools.
This is she has a really unusual biography, and she has become a historian of her own people and other neighboring Athabascan peoples of Alaska, and that's the topic of Adeline's talk called "Writing Lengthy History of Alaskan Native Communities." While I think they are still working on the technical matters, so maybe you start talking, and then when they're done with your PowerPoint, you'll switch to. Is it okay? Yeah, maybe next to that microphone. No, you don't have. It's like that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk today about history and the writing of history and the attitude with which people are writing history. And when I was a child, when I was 12 years old, I was told that Alaska Natives do not have a history. And all the history books in Alaska begin with colonization. They begin with Russians coming into the Aleutians and up into the Kuskokwim and the Yukon rivers. And then with the English coming from east. So this is the history that we were learning as children. But I wanted to talk about the kind of ambience and what was happening, the atmosphere of writing history as I was growing up. So in 1991, Ernest S. Burst Jr. Is a man who spent almost all of his professional life in the Northwest Arctic. And in 1991, he presented a paper and he said that there are Native historians. There is a Native history, and that these Native historians should not be overlooked and regarded as their idea of history should not be regarded as hearsay. And it should be a part of their prehistory. And he further said that if what the Native historians are saying is included in prehistory, then there is a far more exciting history that no one knows about up until this time. So are we finding this? So this was in 1991, and I was going to college at that time, in 1991. And another example, kind of fast, we're kind of going back now to 1981. My mother's name is Adeline Peter, and all of the language, the transcriptions, the translations, many biographies and books are actually written by my mother in our language. And she was a student of Michael Klaus, and she worked extensively with Jeff Lear. And so she did a tremendous amount of work. And she wrote a book called Next I Lived, which means I lived among the next I. And so this is a tribal group. And so in the beginning there was an insistence on verbatim translation. So she wrote this book verbatim, and it came across as simplistic, naive, and the storyline did not flow. So I went to Michael Klaus and I said just what I said to him. And he said, oh, well then maybe you should retranslate it. And I said, okay. So my sister at that time, if you all remember the first Microsoft computer was a little tiny box. Like she sat there, she entered it into the Microsoft computer. And it took me about a year and a half to, in the middle of raising the kids and going to school, to retranslate her book. And in 1992, her book came out with its new translation. And in 1993, her book won an American Book Award. So it makes, the way you translate things, the way you understand things, it makes a big difference, huge difference. So do we have it yet?
No.
Why are you using this computer? Why don't you use one of yours?
Что не так? Давайте, наверное, без зума тогда. Хотя бы вы видите презентацию.
So we fast forward. We fast forward to 2022. And in 2022, there was a book that came out called Landscape and
Memory. And I forget the subtitle, but it's something about indigenous
indigenous landscape and memory. It's a big deal. Yeah. Very expensive production. It took 7 years.
Expensive production. Well, it took 7 years for 12 writers to write this book. And there are articles who hold doctorates, but not one wrote an article. Nope. You cannot go running around
the people, then we will show you this. I want you to read this. This is an example of an ethno-history. So, let's see.
It doesn't go.
No, so, okay.
Try to point it this way. I will be helping you.
Okay, okay. This is Ernest S. Birch that I was talking about earlier. If anybody wants to photograph what he said in 1991. I'm using my mother, Kathleen Peter, and our new translation of the book.
I'll be helping you.
So this is Memory in the Landscape, my beautiful book. Now I want to go to the research that I have done, and I've spent many years researching. So I started with the oldest books that I could find, and when I first started researching, there were very few translations of early Russian explorers, and so I researched the Hudson Bay records. I researched everything I could get my hands on, and always I went from big to focus, big to focus in my research, because it was there was no other way to do it. And then after a while, I began to realize that the things that interested me and what I wanted to communicate to people about my people and to teach my own people our history is that they didn't interest anthropologists or the historians. So everything that they read, I went back and I started reading the stories of school teachers, the stories of other Native Alaskans, even a single little line in Charles Lucier's papers. There was a clue of information that I needed to put together the story of how our people moved around, why they moved around. So,
I moved it.
Okay, you moved it. All right, so then I started going through all the oral records at the Alaska Native Language Center, but I didn't have time to go to the communities necessarily and to talk to people. But I started seeing that the oral histories, for instance, I'm having a difficult time trying to put this together. The stories from one region and another region and another region would correlate. But it took a long time for me to realize that there was a correlation between all these Alaska Native communities about what was happening. So that each community only had a snippet of the story. So it took me, so next slide, please. All right. Okay, so it took me a while to realize that for instance, the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, which caused the mini ice age in Europe, well, it was all around the world. And it is only now coming to light how it affected other communities in the world. Well, it had a very big effect on the communities in Alaska. So put the next slide. So I discovered that in my research, I discovered there were 4 things that happened in the Alaska Native communities. And first of all, volcano erupted in 1855 and 1816. And in 1817 in Alaska, it caused winter. It was a normal spring. It caused winter to come again in the end of June. Full-on winter in the end of June. So you think of hunter-gatherers, they had not the time to gather the resources for the coming winter. So they were caught without their winter clothing. They were caught without enough resources to get them through the winter. And so there was a huge drop in population. So that's 1817, 1818. And then the next thing that happened is that this happened just after the coming of Kosygin to Alaska. So when he came, he brought trade goods, and the trade goods started coming earlier than that, but we'll just use him as an example. So when the trade goods came, you had a reduced population who then started competing for the best trade routes. Now, the trade route system in Alaska is all along the river routes. And so these routes were carefully guarded. And so there was a big intertribal displacements happening. And these intertribal displacements caused huge language shifts, which all this happened before they ever met the Europeans. All this jostling for the best trade routes and for the best hunting grounds and displacements of whole communities. Okay, next slide. So over the years, I started writing them. And so the first 2 writings I started writing the people who live among the caches. And so if you notice here, I deal with a lot of language communities. So I'm sitting in my office. Many times I bring out the Inupiat book. Many times I go and I bring out another dialect of Inupiat. And then I'm talking to my own elders about place names. So and I have friends who help me sometimes with these words. But I don't know about in Russia, but in America, the Native American community is extremely ethnocentric. So if you want help from the Inupiat people, then you must write to them and ask them for this or that. And sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't. And in my case, I have friends, so I was able to bypass a lot of having to get records. So when I first started writing this then, I went to the Park Service and I met Mr. Jeff Rasick and I started giving lectures about this book, the history of my people. And then I went to the university and all of these were very helpful to me because then I started seeing the stories starting to take shape in my mind, the way they would fit into the present academic atmosphere. And so Jeff Rasick started working with me on drawing the map of 1,800 of the indigenous peoples. And I have it here, and you can put it on the wall as you please. It is actually a very beautiful map. And it's, I call this map, no, it's a very large one.
Right there.
And I call this map a map in progress. Because if you look here, this is the earlier version from 2010 and 2020. And before this, there were just lines drawn about estimates of where people actually were. And what I have done is I put in the rivers. So there's clearly demarked areas where people actually live, where it made sense for them to be. And but I'm learning this also as I go along, because you have to follow things like that make sense. You can't just fantasize about things. You have to be truthful about what you know and what you don't know. And so this is the latest version that I did was in 2022. So for me to have someone who is in a government position who has the wherewithal to do a map of this sort, it is a tremendous deal. It's a tremendous gift to me. And it's a tremendous gift to the community, because what I'm doing is I'm kind of, with this, my work, is I'm laying the framework for other Alaska Native and Indigenous historians to start writing their own histories in their own regions. So this basically then is my work. So as I said, this is basically the framework for other communities to write their histories. And with that, I want to talk about how this book that I wrote, this Iagagnian, is going to be on the internet, on Kindle, available on March of 2025. And so in my lifetime, I've been for a period of time, I didn't have to use the computer. And for that period of time, that's when you guys were growing up, all sorts of things I discovered that I didn't know. I didn't know WhatsApp, I don't know X, I don't know. I've never been on Facebook. Zoom is just totally uncomfortable for me. And I get terribly frustrated with the computer. But since then, I decided that, hey, you have to learn things this is just a tool. You have to learn it. Because I need to learn this so I can write and manipulate maps and show them in the books and on presentations without going to someone else and saying, well, I need this done and this done and that done. So I've decided that computer literacy is a good idea. And that is where I will leave you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adeline. Please, questions, comments? We have some time for discussion. Please.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, maybe you could outline some main characteristics of approach to researching indigenous history for someone who does not have connections to indigenous communities. I understand that compassion and inclusion of indigenous experts are important, but I know that there are probably other complexities that I cannot grasp from outside it. So I'd like to know that.
I could hardly hear the question.
Maybe you come up here and ask it once again, okay? Because it's too far away. Just было трудно расслышать.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering maybe you could outline some main characteristics of approach to researching indigenous history for someone who does not have connection with indigenous communities. I understand that compassion and inclusion of indigenous experts are important, but I know that there are definitely other complexities that I cannot grasp as an outsider. But you said that it is possible to do an excellent research from some of the community, as I understood it.
Wow.
Advice for outsiders.
Advice for outsiders. Advice for outsiders who want to study in Alaska or any ethnic group, any ethnic group, right?
Maybe somewhere in Mesoamerica, yeah? No? Where do you work? In Chile? In Chile, okay.
I think you get a hold of the local community first, and you can also go through universities to do that. Do get in touch with the local communities, and you always have to be watchful. So when you come into the community, you see, like the caste structure, so to speak. and you observe that, and you respect that, and you deal within that system. And then once you get to the native communities, oftentimes it takes years. As Tiger Birch said, Ernest Birch, when I met him in 1996, he said to me, you know, Adeline, it took me 30 years just to ask the right questions. So it takes many years. If you go to a community and you want to write about them, you need to get to know them.
The earlier you started, the better for you.
Yes, 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 for sure.
Okay, more questions? Please, speak up.
Thank you very much. It was impression, a strong impression. As I understand, you don't have any centralized knowledge repository in Alaska. That's why you must to pick up sources from many different places. Do you feel a need for such a repository where all records and photos and I don't know, video and audio recordings would be gathered together?
There are repositories like at the university in Fairbanks and in southern Alaska, but at the time, you know, like these things are being developed as we talk. But at the time when I was learning, it was hard to because there was no computer. You couldn't look it up on the computer and find out where to access this and that. Now I can do that, but then I could not. So I don't think it would have helped me much to have all that information when I first started. Because when I first started, I was young.
So you feel that things go better with information spread. So now you have all resources at once in the internet, and that's enough for research.
Well, if you're going to do research it depends on for what. You know, like if you're going to do research on I don't know, some industry, then you can look at all kinds of reports and do research without actually going out and visiting these people. Because it's all available now, like in the censuses, in government reports, in the business reports, and the businesses like the beer industry, for instance, they have huge gatherings, and they report on themselves too. So you have a lot of information, but for the kind of work that I do, for just as an example, I have 3 more books that I wish to write. And so the next one is going to be called The Life and Times of Shahnyanti. So he was a very famous chief in the Yukon Flats. And so everybody in the Yukon Flats assumed that he came from the Yukon Flats. But my 2 uncles, great uncles, they gave information One, they gave information to McKinnon, and then they gave information to Osgood. So two separate sources, they said, no, he came from up Panama way. So then I have to go and research everything that's available on Apertanana. And so I went to all the recent books. I went to all the old books. I went again to the missionary records. And that's what I did. That just kind of demonstration of the kind of work that I do. I'm in many ways, I'm kind of myopic as an ethnohistorian.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, please.
We have a question from our colleague, who is here, and it's a specific one. About 20 years ago, you had a disagreement with Ernst Birch regarding the ethnic linguistic identification of the Athabaskan group occupying the mountainous area at the headwaters of Koyukuk River in the first half of the 19th century. So Nikita is not familiar with the latest works by Birch and by you. So, and he's asking, did you and your opponent reach a consensus on these controversial questions, or can we state the coexistence of two concepts now, Birch's Kachin concept and Raboff's Koyukon concept?
Very good question.
Well, Nikita, he specialized in this area and he's very interested. Unfortunately,
too bad he's not here.
Yes. So I'll pass him the response.
That's a nice question.
Okay, so in when I finished university, I read this article by Craig Bishler and Ernest Birch, and they're writing about they're writing about the Dene, and so and it's too bad that in his lifetime we didn't come to a real understanding about what happened, because what happened then is that we were Northern Koyukon, they're called nowadays. And we lived in Upper Noatak and in the Upper Kobuk. And so when in 1816, after Kotzebue's visit, we were displaced. There was a first displacement. And in that first displacement, we were pushed out. So out of the Upper Noatak into the Upper Kobuk. And so the Inupiat came in, but there were different groups of Inupiat. There's the northern Inupiat, and then there's the ones from Kotzebue Bay. So when we were pushed out, we're speaking Koyukon, we're speaking Inupiat, like most of the Alaskan Native communities were multilingual. So if they lived in where we lived, we were speaking Koyukon, which in several dialects of Inupiat. So, and all these people in northern Alaska, they're intermarried for generations because of the trade route and because we're not talking about thousands of people, we're talking only about hundreds of people. So this displacement that took place is, I had to put the story together through the Inupiat community and through our community. and through old records. It's the only way it could have been done. So, you know, Ernest Birch passed away, and we never resolved that agreement. But what I'm saying is going to be just become commonly accepted because the record is there.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll back you.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question. Which strategy is better to do the research? Trying to interact with the community or just behave yourself as usual, but of course with respect to the traditional community?
Come here again.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, which strategy is better to do a research? Trying to fit into the community or just behave yourself as usual, but of course with the respect to the tradition of the community?
So the early researchers that came to Alaska, they had limited time, and they came to Alaska with certain ideas of what they wanted to learn. And so when they came into the community, there was lots of information that people knew, but this information was cast aside because that's not what the researcher wanted to know. So when you go into any community, you have to listen to people. Just listen to people. For instance, there was an interviewer who interviewed this lady, and this lady was a master of how to live in the woods. But because that's not what he wanted to hear about, talk about, he kept ignoring this lady's wish to share this information. And so it was a loss to us, a loss to the researcher, that he did not allow her to just talk about this material culture in a way on a daily basis.
That's
does that answer your question?
Yes, following the things on.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Any more questions? Please.
Well, you mentioned that there were...
Please come closer.
You mentioned that there were a lot of language shifts when there were migrations of different local communities, and as far as I understood, you used in your research only such sources like books and oral stories from people from different local communities. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. Did you try to compare the results of what you got from these different stories with information about different dialects? Or I suppose that every people, how to say, ethnos.
Ethnic group, yeah.
Yes, ethnic group has not conformed language, but different dialects. And when different local communities migrated, maybe we can trace these migrations by accounting some features which are peculiar to some dialects.
I'm not a linguist, but I do observe some things where language is being combined. For instance, in the middle Yukon, there were a group of lower Tanana speakers, and so they speak a Dena'ina language, a Kari language, and so their word for river is no. It's one of the words for river, and our word for river is han. So what they did was they took a river, it's now called the Ray River on the maps, but the original name for it was hanno. So it's a combined word. And also, you know, like the French Canadians, fur traders came into the Yukon Flats. So in the Yukon Flats, people say le sil for salt.
Is it a French word?
It's a French word, oh. Yes. and so our original way to say thank you was hut. But the French Canadians came in and they said merci. And so we cannot say R and C together. So we say merci. So nowadays, you know, the younger generation growing up thinks that that's original word from our language. So merci, they say all the time now.
Well, such words are quite apparently can be traced to influence of foreign peoples, but I meant just some peculiar features, like some word may be pronounced in one dialect with a sound like t, and in another dialect with a sound like ch. This is just an example. I mean such correspondences, and I think that maybe you could collaborate with some linguists to deepen your research.
Jim Kari, for
example. That's why we have linguistic conference.
We have a digital map that on Monday that Jared Smith will show, and it's open access if you know the URL, and we're constrained about multilingual variants place names, but the Dene are so rigorous that there'll be 3 and 4 versions of a conspicuous feature, and it can be attributed. In the digital map, it doesn't do the job as much as having lists, but you can see like 3 variations of place names. But I in 1996 I published about these hydronymic districts in northern Athabaskan, and there are 7 different hydronymic districts in between Alaska and Hudson Bay. In Alaska around here, there's a knot boundary and a jik or neek boundary. And neek originally meant on the upstream, and actually the general proposition is true. And in Canada, they have dominant hydronyms, and then they can have minority hydronyms like avenues among streets where they can have a reverse hydronym. And those seem to be really stable back in time. And William Bright, for example, he said I should copyright that Athabascan hydronym districts, hydronymic districts. So we co-copyrighted that. And I don't know that that's ever been determined for other large language families, but it's a very elegant trade-off. And like the Yukon River, the boundary is around Beaver Creek, north of Fairbanks, and which end names are from there. And you can get Koyukon, Lower Tanana, and which end variations of major streams like Ekdal, as Edorchin and Jik, and in that case, Koyukon, and which end, and that means a birch is suspended up, and so the bilingual place naming is natural, and it promotes intermarriage across the language boundaries and easily knowing that other guys' place names, and we're always eager to document that. Plus, even in extinct areas where the language has been depopulated, there are interesting ways that a few more names come up in certain areas. So you can always improve on it in small ways. It's quite gratifying, for example, to find a name on a 1851 map of Cook Inlet in the entomologists, it's the Mannerheim map of 1851 for Redoubt Volcano, which is straight across from Kenai. You can just see this word on it, and it was not known by any living people that I could ask, and it's Koyalaja, and that's the caldera of this active volcano, and that means that the child's ashes is plain as day, and so we got this wonderful name from this, the first entomological, this would have been Russian-sponsored research to Mannerheim, and it's fun, it's still philology, like you're very good at it in Russia and in your Asian studies. We don't have the depth for that, but you have plenty of toponymic studies here.
Okay, well, let's thank Adeline one more time. Now we have a 1 hour lunch break, and after the lunch, we'll move from Alaska to Amazonia, and we'll hear talk by Professor Gary about his experience in Amazonia. So now, lunch break. Я, в принципе, могу свой компьютер предоставить, если надо, если это поможет. Я бы не хотел... But it's still American. Maya.
Андрей Александрович, что у нас
Это очень хорошо, но я хочу убедиться, что у нас все работает, потому что если мы опять будет такая катастрофа, то мы можем их оставить. Ну хорошо. Я бы хотел, чтобы Джин забрал этот свой компьютер, потому что я могу дать свой, если нужно, или вы используете какой-то местный.
Сейчас я у нас опять проблемы с да, сейчас.
Да, но лучше его вернуть. Он сейчас полчаса его пошел. Так, надо понять, как эти статистики наши.
Я могу себе заведы, это гарантированно. Хорошо, я отвечаю.
Спасибо. Мы все-таки хотим перекласться.
Я тоже хочу.
А вот эти флешки, они... Вот эта вообще, она ваша? Или...
There's one here. We'll be standing here. We'll be standing here, yeah?
Talking to the microphone. What is this? Well, this advances it. Okay, thank you.
He's major specialist in the languages of Amazonia. He graduated originally from here in Michigan and also the city here in New York. And he's an anthropologist and a linguist. He was working for a long time as a coordinator of the linguistic division at the Anthropological Museum in this city of Dene, the mouth of the Amazon River. It's a wonderful museum, and it's unusual in having a unit for linguistic research. Dena'ina studied languages mostly of the state of California in Brazil. He published the grammar of Gabriel, one of the languages of that area. And also he studied other languages as well. He's not just a researcher doing his own work, but also a person in charge of the whole field. He starts to find a many people, linguists and anthropologists in different places, and bring them to the area and orient them to work with particular languages and communities. So that's, I think Amazonia is really fortunate having such a coordinator. And I won't take more time. Dene, please. You have to.
Okay, excuse me, my voice. I'm still a bit wiped out from my trip. How many people are actually anthropologists? I'm trying to understand who's here. Okay. Well, the rest of you vagabundos, what are the rest of you? Linguists or archaeologists or what? Very specialist linguists? Okay. Well, okay, I'm going to talk about a number of things. I am a regular Amazonian field worker. I eat monkeys, armadillos, electric eels, and these things. And, well, you know, it's a good life. Now, let me go over very briefly Brazil. Okay. Some of the most important points about the geography. I want to do an overview and then talk a bit about what has been indigenous politics. Okay, what are they doing there in relation to native groups? And if one does field work, how does that interface with all these things that are going on? Right? First of all, the overview. This is where I work, actually, Belém. Okay? This is the big river, the biggest in the world, that flows through here. This part here is high. It's about a kilometer high, and it's old geologically. This is also old geologically. This area here, where the Andes erupted, the Andes are only there for 6 million. So the Amazon used to run out in the other direction, and that popped up. So this is geologically new, and the water coming out of this, it's called whitewater rivers, is rich in nutrients. These others are called blackwater rivers. Okay. Now, quite a bit of the area is Amazonia. However, these areas are more temperate here. So that's not so different, you know, from someplace like, say, the United States. And indigenous people have an adaptation to that. One of the main differences in the division of the
other groups. It has to do with the ecological adaptation. Some live on the river. These are riverine groups. Others have an adaptation where they live between the rivers, where it's interfluvial. Where I work is right here. Okay. So those are interfluvial. So they live on small headwater streams. They don't really make very good canoes, and they don't spend much time on the big rivers. But they hunt. Migrations with these groups, whenever you look at the textbooks, they have to be migrations running up and down rivers. Nobody's ever seen any such thing. What they do is go from one watershed to the other, because that's their adaptation. Okay, so that's one of the basic things. Okay, about the prehistory. First of all, the whole area is quite heterogeneous in a lot of ways, and the past is quite not what you would have thought. Okay, now humans have been there for at least 12,000 years, possibly more. That's one of these debates that still goes on and on. By 9,000 before the present, human populations are in various regions there. So these have begun spreading around there. Something that is rather strange that I've never understood, there's a period from 8,000 to 3,000 before present where the climate was drier, which means that the rivers go down and the forests shrink. What is peculiar in this is that there are more archaeological sites in this period than there is in this period. So there's actually fewer archaeological sites during this period. There are two regions where it was always occupied. Other places are occupied and then disoccupied. So there's a whole lot of flux and a lot of different things happening as they dig more into the archaeological record. One of these areas is Upper Madeira. That's especially where I work. Okay, and that is the lower Amazon. One of the early settlement things was based on shell middens, but they're sucking down shellfish and throwing the shells, right? And after you do this for a number of centuries, you have these gigantic deposits of shells. There they found in the middle Amazon, they already had ceramics like 7,000 years ago. So that gives you a high population density without agriculture, but still it created these conditions for a heavy, a heavy occupation, and they had some specialization. Okay, there's some in southeast Brazil down toward. There's some ceramics down south about 5,500 years before present. And this is where it was mostly in the shell mid. Now, about 9,000 years ago, some plant domestication starts slowly. What they call black earth, and this is a big thing in archaeology. I don't know how it works out in Central America and other places. Black earth is where people have lived for some time, and they're not just sure what caused it. It's probably people throwing out garbage. And so after a while, it builds up and you get this black earth, which is very fertile. And so the farmers like to get into that and destroy the archaeological sites. That makes them very happy with what we do. That was already going on. So there's settlement back in Rondônia, the place that I showed you. And then later it comes in about 2,000 years later. About 3,000 years before present, the work on domesticating plants becomes economically important. So they were working on plants, for example, in Rondônia. Eduardo Neves, who's one of the great archaeologists there, he found manioc, beans. He told me maize, which surprised me because I didn't think it was that old. This is about 5,500 years ago. But they weren't using it. They weren't really dependent on it. It was not economically important. About 3,000 years before the present, that comes on. This is probably an intrusive tradition that came down from Colombia or somewhere. This shows up. It does not have settlement, does not have black earth underneath it, but it shows up suddenly. So it looks like that was just intrusive. Then this gives way to other traditions. 2,000 years before present, the transformational cultural transformation, they start to get various ceramic traditions that are different from each other. There's contacts between populations. The populations become larger, they expand. There's expansions probably of linguistic groups. That's where you get the spreads of the Tupi people and of the Kari people and so on. And that's what's going on there. We find defensive structures, and there was warfare from 2,000 years before present. In some areas, large villages connected by roads and trade networks. Okay, let me move this. So this is what happened, right? White people came, and then everything became screwed up. So they first arrived, Cabral arrived in 1500. I think one of his men went up to greet the Tupinamba, and they ate him. So this is the first time we had a settlement. The Jesuits controlled much of the Amazon. There were even not that many. I think there were only something like 150, but they were able to set up things. They had the support of the state. The end of the first colonization, it wasn't all Portuguese. There was Dutch there and the French there, and they had warfare constantly. And the indigenous groups, rather foolishly, would ally with one side or the other, and they'd end up killing each other and so on. And the Portuguese won. At the end of the 17th century, sugar production declined and gold was discovered, and it went into the interior. Okay, the part of Amazonia, which is called Grão Pará, was settled later because it's kind of hard to get in there and hard to get around, especially before there was motorized transport, because you had to row all the way up the damn Amazon River to get very far. In the mid-16th century, early 17th century, there were a lot of references to large villages there. By early 18th century, those stopped. And so people were dying from diseases. They were dying from slavery. So many people were captured. They called them descents. So they would go after indigenous people who had not been contacted and bring them into contact, where they would either end up on a Jesuit mission or else they'd end up in slavery, which is extremely bad conditions. Some people ate clay just to kill themselves to get out of this. So it was very grim. The Jesuits would accompany these expeditions, so they kind of had a bad feeling about doing this. At the same time, they kept telling them, well, yeah, but if we don't do it, it'll be worse yet. So they would go assist on these things. This, by the way, is when the language Nyengat began to appear, which is one of the most interesting languages in contact. There were Tupi-Guarani dialects on the east coast of Brazil. The Jesuits learned these well enough to use that a lot of the groups were Tupi-Guarani, so they could talk to a lot of people with this. They wrote this down. They did grammatical descriptions. They used this as an administrative language. When new groups came in, they learned this language. But each new group screwed it up more. So this is called effects of substratum. So gradually you start, the morphology starts getting wiped out. And you get a simplification of the syntax. But that's effective substratum. It was never a Creole. It was never invented by the Padres, which is some strange story that somebody moved up. However, about 1750, the Portuguese crown became very annoyed with the fact that the Padres were controlling everything. And so they started throwing them out of Amazonia. And it became more complicated for the indigenous populations that were there. Meantime, there's people off in other areas without contact. Right? When I went to the field in 1975, most of the Sightalaga Indians were without contact. The Zora were completely out of contact. The Paitet had been in contact only since 1969, and they were still quite a handful to deal with. I mean, these people are quite, it's a warrior society. These people are quite independent, but they're good guys. Now, there was declared independence from Portugal in 1822. Time before the Second World War and during the Second World War, there was a dictatorship, Getúlio Vargas, this dictatorship. Then the military dictatorship, the Americans, of course, helped this take place and supplied equipment for tortures and things like that. I was there in this period. If you said the word government in a restaurant, you could hear a pin drop. it didn't talk about it. Right? Now, other than that, I never saw a problem. On the indigenous reserves, the situation did not really deteriorate because you had a smaller group controlling the exploitation and so on. After 1985, democracy. In 2018, this guy, Jair Bolsonaro, was voted as president. And that was conservatives, and they were supported by lumbering interests, by mining interests, by missionaries, evangelicals, agricultural interests. And so they wanted to grab indigenous land as much as they could. To facilitate that, if you can convert them to religion to make them more manageable, that's is considered quite good too. The reason that indigenous groups, the juridical reason why indigenous reserves exist in Brazil is that they need that much land in order to maintain a way of life. So to get the land away from what you have to do, get rid of the religion, get rid of the language if you can, and get them sucked into being reliant on lumbering and mining and these kind of things. Then you say, well, hey, you know, what do you need all that land for? Let's grab it. There was, well, this is still debated. Now, Lula was elected a couple of years ago. Here is, this is what I said before. And here's a point that is important. All of this depopulation, this whole thing of people coming into contact and dying in very large numbers, what's going on there? And what can you do about that? Looking at it, I went over the records and everything. What's generally, the cause of death is generally pneumonia, and that comes from pneumonia complications of respiratory diseases because they didn't, indigenously, they didn't have cold, didn't have measles and these things. So the pneumococcus is always there, but when the lungs are full of fluid, it gets a chance to multiply. So when I was talking to the Gavião sometimes about what had happened to them, it'd say, sharp pains in the chest. That you can cure with simple penicillin. And you can block measles and these things just by vaccines. So why don't they do it? Well, because everybody just stands there. When one person starts standing, other people stand there. Today, this is improved. One of the pioneers, medically, there's this famous park. It's called a park. A park is a traditional term for a reservation where they have a number of ethnic groups. This is famous because of the work of the Vilas Boas brothers. They got the fame out of it, but the guy who made it all work was a medical doctor, Noel Nutes. So he imposed quarantine on people going there. They kept people reasonably isolated. They got the vaccinations in, and they had people there to treat things with antibiotics and other remedies. You know, I scratched my head when I said, well, what's so different about this guy? Everybody's screwing up. Who's this dude? Or this one guy can do something intelligent, you know? So I checked out, what's the difference with this guy? He's a Jew from Ukraine. Yeah. That was different. So the guy went in there, he says, you know, he looks at this and looks at the indigenous people. He says, well, that's minority group. Hey, that's just like me, you know? So he did his work there. So it's been known since the 1960s that this was all possible. Anyway, in the region where I worked, that's not what they did. We got the Mireles, father and son, who I think wiped out at least 70% of every group that they contacted. It's just horrible mass death. Let me show you a little bit of that. This picture came out pretty dark. These are the Paitet Indians, also called Surya Pondonia, when they were being contacted. These guys are pretty proud, tough as nails. They know everything about the forest. And, the more I get from them, with this culture, the more impressed I am. So this was at the time of the contact. When they have these first contacts, all the journalists go there, you know. Wow, well, what's it like? Whoa, whoa. Tell you, I did identify language of two indigenous guys who never had contact, and they had to identify the language. And then I took Bach training, and I explained to the guys who were there from the government how to control, how to treat pneumonia complications if they got it. But dealing with these two guys, I'll tell you, it's not like anything you ever saw in your life, man. These guys are really different. These guys are really different. So these guys were, you know, out of contact. They didn't even know who these people were. They didn't know what language they spoke. There was a journalist having his picture taken and everything. Somebody, a French medical doctor was through there, Jean-Pierre Pinot, and he said they always accepted vaccination. They faked it. They gave him some medicine. They filmed them, did photos of them injecting them with some medicine for cold, which did nothing at all. I just let them die. And this is what that looks like. It's not pretty. Aside from the disease, the whole social structure collapses, and you can't, there's nobody on their feet in order to get water, in order to get food, and so on. So the whole thing is just a whole mass death situation. So this was what happened with this when this handsome guy did his contact. And the guy who wrote this up in the National Geographic said these guys were wonderful. And, the indigenous people resisted care. We would have to wait until later when we could get into the villages and make the necessary research to guarantee the place of these people in the future. But it's all bullshit, you know. And the same guy, my friends got down were on this contact. Same guy was drunk every night, and he was taking men and boys into the forest for sex, and it was out of control. There's a hero, Operator Mireles. So then he has his picture taken saying that, oh, once again, look what Western civilization has done. We must ask, does this government not does not care about the needy? He was the guy who did it, you know. That everything's the cause of capitalism, everything's the cause of Western civilization, everything's the cause of I don't know what, except him. But he was the guy who concretely made these. I talked to this gentleman in 1977 in his house, and he told me that the Sintalaga tribe was coming out to the road, and they would be getting diseases and dying, and now the few who stayed alive would put them on a poster too. So, well, what are you going to do about this? Takes me to his library, puts down this book. The Disappearing Indian by Pemberton. It says here they're all doomed to die. The problem of the Indian is the problem of the poor people. It's hard to do anything about one without the other. The question is the political system. He would go through these raps. And in Brazil at that time, she's doing the dictatorship. I said, wow, this guy's fantastic. What a mind. He's traced all this. Anyway, after this debacle, we went on to the wow, and I think killed about 80%. I tried to record a woman talking about it, and she couldn't do it. There were so many children raised by people who were not their parents. There's just so much mass death and so on. It's still a lot of people think the guy's fantastic. But that's what it looks like if you don't do anything. No. In the case of the Zoroa, if you read that little thing I published in the memoir, I talked to the Gavião about getting the vaccination done. I talked to the missionaries, and they sort of stole the Zoroa, and they got this done. So they lost relatively few people. So that was worth doing. Nobody knows we did it, but one of the best things I ever did. This is the indigenous reservations. Since the contact was here, these are people where they have more, indigenous people, more population. Again, this is where I work, and these are the pipes here. Okay, these are the language families. Let me go over this. I know it's hard without having the map. The Macro-J groups were thought to have been centered on this Planalto region, which is this high 1 meter dry region, where these are the guys who do the log races, and they've got very complicated social. They've got moieties, they've got clans, they've got age sets, but it turns out that Macro-J extended, that is the work of Kari part, extended far out to the west. He demonstrated that the German chief, the German chief family, also belongs to the Macro-Js. So these people were much farther out west. Then someone else, Adeline, demonstrated that were also Macro-J. There's another group of so those people were farther out west. But Tupi, which has nine subgroups, most of which are in Honduras out west, so they probably came out of there. It'd be unlikely that they'd say, well, what the hell, guys, let's all independently go to Honduras, So they probably came out of there. This, again, with linguistics, we're being able to reconstruct some things from the kinship. We're able to reconstruct some plants and animals that they had recognized at that time as implements. So that's coming along. Whether this is related or not is still a question. Arawak is spread all over the place. It goes all the way up to Florida in the United States. Where the homeland was is a question. Eichenwald puts it in the middle of along the Amazon River. Hard to say. They have the fame of setting up networks that are reasonably peaceful and cooperative. This is the stereotype of the Arawak. Here, again, a lot are in the north, there's some in the south. Some are out west. Tucano are riverine, they're along the upper northwest. Ottawa are in the west, and not so many. Not a hook where Patty Epson and sort of people work. Our hunters and gatherers in the upper here Negro. Nambiquara, Chapapura, another group. The Yanomami you may have heard of because of the bad news from there. That's where Shagan works, and it didn't help the reputation very much. A linguist that works with us claims he has a basis of things with actually 6 different languages. he actually mapped this thing out quantitatively and tested it. So, well, okay, the rest of these are small, a little bit of them. Okay. So that's what the families look like. The second thing can be superimposed. This is the language endangerment. What is problematical here is that they included major dialects along with languages. What is a dialect? What's a language and what's an ethnic group? Is a confusion that you'll never get rid of. I mean, they just can't figure it out, you know. Please define your terms. And they say, what do you mean? But there's many of these that are seriously endangered. So there's a lot of work to do. Okay, national language surveys. This is still that problem. There's about 150, 160 distinct indigenous languages still spoken by the criterion of mutual intelligibility. One thing that's interesting is it's possible to get a pretty good quantitative estimate from people saying, well, some forms of language are pretty close, like Portuguese of Sao Paulo or the Portuguese of Brasilia. Others are farther, like the Portuguese of Portugal and the Portuguese of Sao Paulo. Others are still farther yet, like Spanish and Portuguese. How far apart is this language with your language? And people will tell you, and they'll hit it, which is interesting. But there's a way you can get a reasonable estimate of this kind of thing. Anyway, the IDGE, which is the group of statistics, in their infinite wisdom, decided there are 274 languages. They put in, they counted every ethnic group as a language, and then they put in all these things that people claimed. I think 232 people claimed they spoke Tupinambarana, which actually went extinct 200 years ago. But they want land, they want something, so they declared this. There's nothing you can do. That's self-determination. But you get all kinds of cuckoo languages. And then the people in the Ministry of Education, they believe all this. Linguists no sabia nada. They didn't know anything. Why look how many languages there are. These dopes were saying so and so. They did this. Okay, there's another inventory going on, which is supposed to correct this. I did the database for this. I did the first version of this, and then they screwed it up. The idea was to get it once over quickly to how many speakers and semi-speakers. Instead of doing that, they made something very, very complicated, and it's more like National Geographic. And instead of getting the vital statistics, you've got some Indian talking to grandfathers. Yeah. So that's not too useful. Now, about academia in Brazil, this is moving up quickly, right? So it's not the case that you have to rely on strangers. The kind of anthropology they do is basically social anthropology, whereas you have anthropologists in the United States using economic or ecological perspectives. You know, how much are they gathering? Who gets this work? The benefits of this work, and those kind of things that are done. There's this whole thing about supposedly protein scarcity, which I don't think ever panned out. And they have French influence. Lévi-Strauss said that Brazilian anthropology is the best in the world because he influenced it. So that's his opinion. Okay. Let's see. In linguistics, they have both generative and functional typological. Starting to do diachronic research and getting interesting things about the prehistory. For the first time, we were able to get a correlation between the human genetics of the tree, you know, the structural tree, and the linguistic classification. So the Tupi was showing up the same kind of thing in the genetic thing. So that was first thing. The missionaries of the Summer Institute of Technology, or Summer Institute of Linguistics, are under control. Their contract was kicked out in 1981, and they have no academic status in any of the Brazilian universities that are reputable. What they are doing, they pretty much pulled back from the field, but what they're doing is supporting the fundamentalist groups. There's some real Bible banging fundamentalist groups, such as Yu.V.Knorozova, who talk about the devil all the time and really strange things, you know. So they're supporting these people. But scientifically, they're obsolete because, well, look, we can get very smart Brazilian students. Who do you think's entering into these guys? They're known for recruiting scientific talents. You're there because you're faithful, right? But they can't really produce very much. What you see with Amazonian languages in IJAL, which is the largest publication for the indigenous languages of America, you see that the publications in Amazonian and on Amazonian languages going way up in recent years. It used to be Mayan languages, you know, now Amazonian languages are going up. At the last International Conference of Amazonian Languages in Bogota, there were 200 linguists from all over the world, and SIL did not show up. They're too popular. But the field is booming. It's a lot of very interesting things happening. So that's nice, you know, in the middle of this. Okay. Brazilian archaeology, this is especially at University of São Paulo, with Eduardo Neves, who has a long line of excellent students waiting to work for him, who keeps, I don't know how many projects going on, and who has a very simple guy, you know, with no arrogance, but he's got $4 million for LIDAR so you can get ground penetrating radar, and they're finding old settlements and things there. One thing they're finding is what's called geoglyphs, which are these structures that they build. There were, you know, some places they have pyramids, some places they have, what these guys did in Amazonia, I guess maybe they didn't have the good stone, you know, but they dug and they made a fortified wall with a big ditch in front of it. They had these like, say, 100 yards, 100 meters square. So what were they doing there? You know, there's no black earth, so apparently nobody lived there. So some people think it was ritual. Some people think they're playing headball. But they stopped doing it about 700 years ago. And the indigenous people that were there today say, I don't know what the hell it was. Okay, human genetics is very strong in Brazil, very good geneticists. They're trying interesting things, and then people began accusing them of biopiracy, and you're stealing precious secrets, and these are billion-dollar companies, and so on. There was some scandal. Actually, they, rather than other people going to get the blood, they just made it available for people to replicate the experiment for $25 because you had to pay the secretary, you had to pay the refrigerator, right? So this became a big scandal thing that you're making a fortune from in genetics, you know, a big product. One unfortunate aspect is a lot of these guys are very good guys, and they were using the genetics information for indigenous health. There's a lot of indigenous health problems. There's a lot of obesity. Where I am, obesity is going way up. Kidney stones, gallstones is going way up. High blood pressure is going way up, and it's because of the diet and so on. Okay. Digital documentation is increasing. Here's something that I'm quite involved in, and yeah, I'm running my mouth here. I get more mouth here. And it might be interesting for people who are going to the field. With the camcorders and recorders today, you could make very high quality recordings, and it costs very little. And you can also train indigenous people to operate these. And they turn out to be very good at it if you train people properly. So given these people, this small number of speakers, and worse, the small number of elderly people who remember the traditions, we're all in a panic and trying to document this as fast as possible. So one way to do this is with digital documentation. After you record it, then what do you do with it? Well, you have to put in the metadata, who filmed this with whom, where, why, etc. And you have to file that in a digital archive, where that can be migrated from one year to the next. And it'll be there the next 50 years. People want that, they can get it. I once recorded a Wayuru shaman. I was waiting for a boat to come. I had 2 free hours, and I recorded enough for 2 CDs. And I had enough of a brain to ask the obvious ethnographic questions. What kind of land did you inhabit? Was it riverine? Was it arid? What was your ritual calendar? Who did you marry? Did you marry within the group, outside? Who were your enemies? Who were your friends? What did you plant? And a bunch of these things. Those 2 CDs are now the Bible for this people, because the man died. And this is everything they have. They want to write this whole thing out. Yeah. And this is 2 hours worth. Okay. So that was pretty encouraging, you know. He said, Christ, I'm glad I did that. There's only 2 digital archives at the present time. One is in the Museo Gallery, and the other is in the Museo dos Povos Indígenas in Rio. There were a number of these international programs, the DOBIs and the ELDP, which began supporting this. And an elder linguist who failed to attract money from this decided to block these, so they attacked all of these so that nobody else would have the money. But he failed. And we won. Now, you remember these guys in the bushes there, the Paitet guys coming up? Well, here they are again. This was in the project. They're learning how to do documentation. They're putting metadata in, I think, at this point. So this is a workshop. I did an intensive course. This is the Gavion where I work. And this is a young Gavion lady recording things. Okay. There's a certain methodology. It all depends on how you do these things. I think I'm going to explain this here. 2 very good linguists told me they went to their group. They left a camcorder there so they could record things. They came back after months. They'd recorded 2 soccer matches. There's a woman from Sao Paulo who went to St. Larga. That's 3 camcorders. Let's see what they'll do. 2 of them were lost, and the 3rd one was saw evangelical rites. So you've got to have some orientation how to do this. You have to protect the equipment. I had another colleague who worked and managed to get a net book for people where he worked. So he gave us someone to take there. He sold it on the street and he drank the net book. So you have to organize things properly. The general orientation is the idea of digital encyclopedia. So look, white people have printed encyclopedias. We don't want to do that because it'll take till the end of the world. Plus you have these problems of writing systems most writing systems are screwed up. But train people in all the techniques and then have an orientation. We had a discussion at one afternoon. I had a list of topics from anthropology to give some ideas. I played other pieces of documentation to bring it home. And everybody invented a topic. We went around and invented a topic. And, okay, what will be your rotator? How are you going to plan this? You're going to do a demonstration? You want to follow somebody going into the forest? Do you want to cut this? Do you want what you want to do? And so on. Pretty soon, everybody's coming up with ideas. And all the recording was done by these same kids who love these instruments. You know, and tell them, hey, this is good quality semi-pro equipment. So yeah, this isn't simplified equipment for the indigenous people. And so, you know, do a good job. At the beginning of the course, I told them, look, this is linguistics at McGill. This is intensive, highly technical. You're going to do this like the traditional Paitea. Everybody learns, nobody gets tired. It's going to work. Any questions? They loved it. So they did, and they worked 4 hours a minute, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, and practiced 2 hours at night. And they learned faster than the white people did. And it lost almost no equipment because the whole system set up where you put it in an equipment case, you take this out, you put in what topic you want to document. If it's approved, you take the equipment, then you film it and do it. Put in the metadata. There's a way of doing a translation because you have to have these things translated also. Bring it all back, turn it in, and we'd get, I don't know, about $100 for that. It's about a week's work. So that's, I hate to say it, one good point about working with these people is they work cheap. So everybody was doing this, and everybody who had a debt in the shop wanted another topic to take care of. They thought of things I never would have thought of. For example, one guy did these micro projects, called it micro projects. Sure, everybody's talking about micro projects and themes, and I don't know what. The 50 medicinal plants, what the names, it's all done in the language. So you see everything in the language in different roles. Adults talking to children, someone, women's speech, all the gestures, all these things are there. And for each semantic field, if you're talking about warfare, you get all of those things for warfare. So after they run up a number of these things, there's a pretty good sample. So you want to, you know, somebody wants to transcribe this someday. Well, okay, fine. But in the meantime, this is accessible to old people. It's accessible to the children. It's accessible to everybody. And these guys were all, you know, at the end of the president, they were feeling very good about themselves. How about this? Traditional pregnancy. How many studies have you seen of traditional pregnancy? So this is the link between the ideology of conception, which is part of the kinship structure, right? And the taboos and all these other things. The girl thought that warfare, crime and punishment. One Paitet assassinates another one. What are the responsibilities of his family to the widow? He had to marry her or something like that. But there's all these topics that, you know, you're looking for. They document 148 topics, total of 110 hours of video. If you put this 1 hour per week in the school, that would run for 3 years. So they did a fantastic amount of work, you know, and there's the intellectual quality, the ethnographic quality was, that thing, I mean, never think of the last. Okay. Now, the problem is there's, the Paitet have 25 villages, and half of each village hates the other half. So to give these things back, Mandela supposed to make a big hard drive. A big hard drive shot full of arrows. So what I'm going to do is put this on YouTube, and they agreed to that. And I can get, there's a big problem with intellectual rights, but each micro project had a coordinator, and he can approve the whole thing. He can speak for that group. So that can get done. I have to get this set up. Currents of indigenous thinking. In the 70s, I said, the dictatorship drew a lot of influence, a lot of things. Shelton Davis, who never set foot in the Amazon, wrote The Victims of the Miracle and said that all the problems were because of transnational corporations. Never saw one if I was there, though. Then in the 1980s, it popped up this idea of self-determination. This is only anthropologists on the Xingu, which is a protected place, would be so naive as to think it was that simple. Meanwhile, economically, you know, industry is moving into these highways, which they extended. Lumbering and mining becomes possible because of increased access. They're co-opting indigenous leaders. And so the lumberman adopted this whole story of self-determination and said, the Indian himself wants to sell his mahogany. I'll take those 20 logs and give him $20. Okay, there's no anything. Think, wow, $20 for me. So this broke open, especially there where I was. And, you know, they would take indigenous leaders to houses of prostitution, cocaine, alcohol, whatever. There's a book coming out about the Central by Alex Quadros, and he talks about it. At diamonds among the Central I know these people, and they had $150,000 of diamonds. Spent it all in a week. Just brought everybody. Spending. No idea what they're doing. Just, you know. Then after 15 years of selling lumber, Peterson Lager said, gee, we're poorer now than we ever were. And it's true. So it was a complete disaster. Still, that's still a huge problem that they're coming in. There was a proposal called emancipation, when the government gives you something that sounds so nice. Emancipation is what? Well, they'll be just like everybody else. They can sell their land. They can sell their daughters into prostitution. They can blah, 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 blah. So anyway, there was international reaction against this. Levi-Strauss wrote also, said, for Christ's sake, you know, you're trying to get rid of the responsibility. People are not in a position for this. This continues in a number of places, and I have a problem with this, with the Gavion. Okay, so although SIL pulled back, there are these other groups, there is full ahead trying to get rid of indigenous languages, which supposedly is illegal. But where I worked with the Gavion, we had to record the shaman. We had to go 2 kilometers away in where there's a roof and so on to do it because of the opposition from the developers. Zora, who was contacted only in 1977, completely wiped out all the traditional religion, all the shamanism, all the festivals and everything's completely taboo. Okay, under the Bolsonaro government, this was, they were in a class by themselves. This is the Yanomami, massive invasion of gold miners, ably supported by organized crime. And those people are really dangerous. You know, that Bruno Pereira, you know, along with Don Williams, the guy who was assassinated, he's a friend of mine, pushed a little too far, you know. And, it wasn't just fishermen that shot him, but it was the organized crime. So this dumped 20,000 illegal miners, supported by organized crime. That's what it was done. This is what the Yanomami happened to them. Some rivers have 86 times the minimum, the maximum amount of mercury. Okay, research authorizations. You have to have an authorization. Okay, you have to go in. You have to have an institution. You have to fill in the forms and everything. You have to have someone who's responsible for you. I'm responsible for Patty Epps. Some other people. We've had very good people, been very useful for Goodwill. The rest of them, no way. Okay, when you send in a proposal, one of the criteria is, so what is this research going to do to develop linguistics, to develop science in Brazil? And you better have an answer. And what's it going to do for the community? Okay, here's the most pressing needs. I tell my students, if you're going to talk about things, focus on what needs to be done. Others you can talk forever, it doesn't make any difference. Okay? Sustainable economic alternatives. You don't have to do that, you know. For example, the Gavion was talking about sell forestry seeds. There's a lack of these. One fellow told me he had 60 kilos of jatoba seeds, which you could sell for 60 real for this. That's 3 minimum wages, right? And it's done, you know, a few days picking this stuff up. The problem is they have no idea how to commercialize anything. So of economic projects that people set up, 95% fail. They fail for just the most, you know, the most obvious reasons. So that is still something. It tends to be now the NGOs who are most involved in this. Okay, and question about training of indigenous students. How about forestry? Forest engineering. So in that way, you can apply the skills. They have a gigantic area, the best workforce in the world in that environment. So these are things that need to be done. Documentation of language and culture. This again is something that needs to be done. Okay, that's if people are applying to do field work, that's the kind of thing you can do for the community. Think that you know, if they ask you what the return is to the community and you don't have an answer, you're going to get thrown out. You know? So you have to come in with something useful to do. And these things are very useful. Sustainable surveys of borders. I mean, a bit of that. Any kind of training is welcome. So there it goes.
Well, thanks so much, Kari. We don't have much time for discussion, but let's ask a couple of questions. Please.
Sorry. So my question is, what's going on now, the situation in Dene and the
Oh yes, yeah. So the amount of where I work, they've stopped the lumbering, and trying to get you have to have a substitute, right? Once you have a substitute, people don't even like these jerks around. You got to see who's on the lumbering equipment, man. But it's better. Lula's problem is that you still got a bunch of these people in Congress, and they're still. He ordered the head of the armed forces to go throw these guys out in the Dena'ina Reserve. He said no, but certainly it's much better.
Maybe I'll ask a question. You mentioned the number of languages that are still there, and for how many of those are any documentation work being done, and on the opposite, which ones are not being done? How many?
I don't really know because it's hard to tell. You know, there's recordings being made here, there, and elsewhere, but they're not. There's no centralized registry, so we don't know. One thing that we're doing, my colleagues and I have a project to put in 4 new digital archives in 4 universities in Arizona. So we got about, I don't know, $1.8 million worth for this. So we're going to set this up and we try to increase this amount. Sao Paulo is also creating an archive. I was just in Brazil and I need to talk to some people and they're putting up one in Brazil and one in Goiás. So we'll see how it goes. And so that would be very useful to get it spread around and make sure that it's indigenous people who can do it. Because that's the key to the whole thing is getting people who are trained and who are interested because they know how to do it and have access to the materials. So you know, that's why this was hugely productive. Nobody could believe it. And then the quality of the ethnography. My God, you know, agriculture before contact, history of all of them. Origin of 4 clans, it's just astonishing, you know. So, but these things that indigenous people can do, that's what we used to try to do that and to set up places where those can be stored and places where they can pick up the equipment and do this kind of thing. So that's what we're working on. But I don't really know what the status of that is. We have something on 80 languages. 80, yeah, but that's really 80 ethnic groups. It's about yeah, something like that. But that may be only 5 sentences. So do something more systematic. That's the idea of telling people, let's get out of the boutique space, the boutique phase of documentation. Let's do McDonald's franchise. Let's spread it to universities. Let's fire up, let's get the thing moving and get the money and get the right equipment and get people trained to do what they have to do. It's a big job. What do you think? Okay. Okay, please.
And I really knew that the importance of proposal but at the same time, you cannot we feel here that the languages of these indigenous people are also the national culture. And you show them where this part are located. Yeah, and I spoke to them many times, and they themselves have their languages, but they're living in big cities, they have to adjust to big cities. And so they're losing, naturally, they're losing because of urbanization. Also, they also not mentioned that there is a difference Portuguese Portugal or Portuguese Brazil, Portuguese São Paulo or Portuguese Brazil. And we need to have also the impact of the region, because, for instance, when I spoke to some ladies in Brazil, I have to listen carefully because they speak illiterate language. Yeah? This is another effect when the European language is a dialect, or whether it is the ethnic, the dialect, or the language. So I think that the natural development and the natural losing language, of course, it is a sad culture. But unfortunately, we cannot stop it. We can record it in a different language, not stop it, unfortunately.
Well, in talking to the students in the house, the association, they said they really wanted to show that the children were growing up in the city without having access to that. So, of course, we've got to do that. But I really feel in the power of the picture. Well, look, he was in that. There was a language in one piece. That was the work they told me because of the state. The one language that has so many but she went back there after 2 years. She went back there. So yeah. Which but all the these places here about this one back. This one back. So it does what it is about it. Most of the young one of the 7 sisters told me, he said the children speak less of the so this is not and with a lot of the students, the colleagues that moved into the leadership, two very old speakers that people out. Maybe the two that put it to the but I didn't say wrong. But the thing is, the music is like Dr. And then long time.
Now that's quite but help people. So I don't think we can say, oh, it's make it right wing and government. Okay. So in this case, yeah, it would be everything. And I think that the social government and local government, they are very important. And for example, in Guatemala and Central America, a very good example of how the languages previously were not in Dena'ina, but they were not anymore. And a couple of generations to young people on their own language, they spoke in their homes, household, never to read. And now you're coming to some you see young people going from seminar, going from schools and speaking by the before the attitude of the government and the local authorities change. So I think that all the results that they presented also demonstrate the importance of the collaboration with government authorities with non-government organizations to not just preserve and to help to maintain it. And in this case, I think that in the world of efforts for the language of the investment, the South Asian was always one. The big society was big society to I always serve the heritage. And then the federal government that is one of the okay, thank you so much, Nancy. Okay, so talking to our next speakers, and I'm not technically but I work in Valentina online, discipline political studies, sciences, and also Russian beginners of humanities. So yes, they are young scholars doing their research in Africa, more anthropological. But this is a very good example of young generation of Russian scholars working in the Madagascar material recordings. So Valentina, she graduated from the University, and Oksana graduated from Russian State Institute of Humanities. And so they are working in Tanzania and Zanzibar, and also have people in Zambia. Since Oksana is doing this for more time since 2008, 2009, and 2019. And we are doing now with collaboration for historical memory and also ethnic non-European formation of ethnic groups and formation of nation states. Comparing Latin America, Central America, and Africa, Sub-Saharan.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Well, some subjects we're going to discuss were already discussed here, but I believe in our fields we have a lot of in common. So my name is Dmitry Dmitrievich mentioned. My name is Oksana. This is Valentine, and we will represent Institute for African Studies and Russian State University for the Humanities as well. And so, as already was mentioned, for many years we've been working in Tanzania on various topics, like the historical memory of 19th century slave trade and historical memory of colonization of Tanganyika by Germans and British. The current state of relations between Muslims and Christians in the country, the process of nation building amid the ethno-racial stratification of society, mutual help groups, and survival strategies among the citizens of poorest neighborhoods like slums. And so we'll start. Yes, this is the places which we visited during our studies. map. And in Tanzania, there are two official languages, Swahili and English. Since the country gained independence, thanks to the efforts of their first president, Mwalimu Nyerere, Swahili was declared the national language. And those days in the whole Africa, there were only two countries which didn't inherit the colonial language, but chosen the African one. It was Amharic language in Ethiopia and Swahili in Tanzania. So, and Swahili initially was a contact language of the East African coast between the locals and visitors from the Indian Ocean region. And so afterwards, it began to penetrate deep into the continent in the 19th century due to the economic interests of Amani and then Zanzibar Sultanate, and the Arab Swahili long distance caravan trade and the slave trade as well have contributed to the implementation of the coastal language in the hinterland. And so Swahili was the language of commerce and business initially. And at the end of 19th century, Tanzania became a colony of German East Africa, and Swahili was chosen as the administrative language. And that time it was transferred from the Arabic writing to the Latin. And so afterwards, Swahili was finally established as the country's national language. So the first president of Tanzania, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, he wanted to build a single nation in the country with more than 120 ethnic groups. And each of them have their own language. This is the map of ethnic groups of Tanzania. Yeah, so really many of them. Not even all can be seen. And so, Swahili was chosen as a national language, and it has become the lingua franca. So today, Tanzanians of different ethnic groups speak to each other in Swahili. I'm remembering the field research I was doing in Zambia. There, people of different ethnic origins speak English to each other. They don't have this Swahili or something like this. But still, and so yes, as it was mentioned here, and the tribal languages are slowly fading away, but I wouldn't say that they are dying, not all of them, maybe just some. And so, tribal languages or ethnic identity is absolutely not an issue on Zanzibar archipelago, but Valentine will tell about it later. And so, and yes, I wanted to apologize. I'm using the term tribal language, tribe, and so on. I know that it's considered not very proper wording among the scholars, but Tanzanians say tribe, or they say Kabila in Swahili. They don't think it's offensive, so I'm trying to be closer to the field like this. So it's just my choice. And initially we were conducting the researches in English, and sometimes with the help of local friends, because we have many of them. We've been working in Tanzania for many years, we and our colleagues, and Tanzanians are very friendly, so it's not hard to find a friend there. And the English, it is still used in the educational system. So since the secondary school, the lessons are carried out in English and so on, college, university, but still, as far as I can say, the level of education is not always a guarantee of knowing English, good mastery of language. What I can say that the level of English depends more on the occupation which person has. Of course, tour guides know English, museum workers know English, and street artists who sell arts to tourists, they know English, even without primary education, because they need it for survival. So, and we mainly, we mainly work in the cities because there, so yes, our report will be on urban anthropology, not like previous ones. So we mainly work in the cities because there you can find all the diversity of ethnic groups, religious groups, social strata, However, sometimes we visit villages, and I work in Uswahilini. That's what I already mentioned before, neighborhoods, the slum. So yeah, this is the flood in Uswahilini during the rainy season. And show us the next picture, please. Yes, this is Uswahilini. You see houses built of something. And so on. Yeah, this is Manzese, the most famous Uswahilini district of Dar es Salaam. Well, this was in 2013. Now it is a little bit better, but still impressive. And so yes, when you work in villages or in Uswahilini, or maybe even in these towns and cities which are not central and active, English won't do. So we've learned Swahili. It was a challenge. And now we use both languages in our interviews. We usually mix, actually. But in Tanzania, even if you know only greetings in Swahili, people are very happy. They are really proud of that. And so the main methods which we use during our full studies are formal and informal interviews, questionnaires, though rarely because they are not good in Tanzania, and of course, participant observation. Well, these methods are universal for all of us, I think. And in our sample, we are trying to keep the balance in ethnic origin, religion, and denomination, age, sex, and educational level of the respondents. And some of them are our friends or colleagues who have already taken part in some researches. And otherwise, we use the snowball method. So we ask a research participant to find some people who wouldn't mind to answer several questions for us. And it is very good to balance the sample because recently, again, some Swahili, because recently I was doing a field research in Arusha city in Tanzania. And apparently we found out that we are out of Muslims in our sample because it's the Christian region. So we asked our previously surveyed people, do you have Muslim friends? Maybe we can get acquainted. So nice. Well, yeah. And no, I don't know. I have a lot of simple things about making research, but still. And so preparation of question lists, it is important to examine the literature, to discuss it with the natives. However, you need to be flexible because sometimes, even though we have a huge experience, but we are not Tanzanians, we still have different cultural background. So sometimes you start doing an interview and you understand that the guy doesn't understand what you want from him. So you need to change the words or maybe even to skip some questions if you understand that the person won't answer, not keen on that field. We don't want to let somebody feel uncomfortable. And so, yeah, so also about the language, I have an argument with my boss in the Institute for African Studies, which lasts for 15 years already because he insists that the proper academic way is to ask about ethnic origin. I said, I'm not going only to academicians, and ordinary people, they don't know this word. They know the word tribe. Maybe it's not polite, but it's understandable. So I choose to be close to people. That's an argument which we have still. And survey forms are not good because there you can't explain all the questions because, you know, the respondent is supposed to fill in the paper with questions. And also I can say that for Tanzania, it's not typical because in Moscow, and I believe in US and elsewhere in the world, there are a lot of people in the streets coming up to you and asking you to fill in a small survey or even some simple things like to rate the cafe, the delivery on the internet and application. They don't have this stuff in Tanzania. So they're absolutely not experienced in this thing. That's why if they see a questionnaire, oh my God, I need to write. They get scared. So I made one research using the questionnaires. I'm not doing it anymore. It doesn't work for sure. And so sometimes also important thing that sometimes the respondents expect some reward for taking part. And we believe that it is not good to pay for taking part in the interviews. It's not good for research purposes because in Tanzania, rumors spread fast, and thus many people would immediately like to take part in the research in order to get money, not because they would be interested to talk to you, not because they understand what are you doing and why, but because they will want the money. And so I believe they won't be sincere, probably. And well, anyway, we don't have budget for that. But what we do, we usually bring some presents from Russia, like sweets, snacks, some jam made of Russian berries, which they don't have there in Tanzania, of course. And also, sometimes we invite our respondents to a cafe to have lunch together. This is also good. Sometimes we go with them for beers. It also works very nice. And if we visit church, well, another time doing researches in churches. So yeah, we can donate money for the needs of the church. But and also if the respondent is selling something like the street artists or guys selling fruit, street artists, then we can buy some of his stuff just in order to develop his business. But that's what we do. We don't pay directly. And so these were the basic rules, and maybe you know all of them. This is our experience. And now we will tell you more about some specific features of field research in Tanzania mainland and Zanzibar archipelago, because these two parts of the country are really different. So I'll start with the mainland, and by the time we'll tell about Zanzibar. Yeah, sweet sour again. So over the years, we've been working in different cities and settlements of continental part. Dar es Salaam, Bagamoyo, Tanga, Pangani, Arusha, Mwanza, Tabora, Kigoma, Kilwa, Masoko. All these places, of course, are different. And I'd say the main characteristic which has impact on the process of communication with local people is the level of tourist or business activity in the location, not even the density of population. This is Kigoma, yes. And this is why the work in Kigoma and Kilwa Masoko wasn't easy, because both these cities were very important trade centers in the past. Kigoma is still an important port which connects Tanzania with neighboring countries through Lake Tanganyika. But it is declining now because of soil erosion and the poor state of the railroad to Dar es Salaam, which was built by German colonial authorities, so very long ago. It's almost ruined. And Kilwa Kisiwani, still Kigoma, like Tanganyika, of course. Beautiful place, by the way. And Kilwa Kisiwani was the capital of Kilwa Sultanate of the Middle Ages. And today, the island medieval ruins are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So tourists come there, but they just visit the islands to see all these beautiful things, and they can stay on the inhabited land part of Kilwa. It's Kilwa Masoko or Kilwa Kivinje, just maybe for one night and then leave. So they don't hang out in the cities. And that's why in both these locations, the tourist flow is very moderate. Local citizens don't know English and they don't have much experience of interacting with outsiders. And thus they are not opened. And in the rest of places where we work, there are tourists or level of business activity is high. So people are talkative, interested in finding new ties and opportunities. Life goes on 24/7. In Kilwa Masoko, I remember there were really few hotels, and it was almost impossible to find a place where to eat, because there people don't go out there. That's it. And the most important thing to know about Tanzanians is that they are very social. They really maintain and keep connections with their family, with their clan, no matter if they live in different parts of the city, and with their neighbors, friends, whatever. Life is communal and it's public. It goes on in the street, and each event is widely discussed. The word of mouth is the main source of information, and it really works fast. The core basis of Tanzanian social life is respect and reputation. These issues are deeply related, of course. And when you are new to some place or community, it is very important to have some connection with a local citizen or someone familiar to them, because people don't know you, but they will trust you if you come with their neighbor, and he will introduce you as a friend. So that's, or you can say you can come alone, but say that your friend, teacher from the local school, Mr. Jason, has recommended you to visit Mr. Salim, and this is the first source of your reputation, which will work for you. And each time when we are visiting a new city, we ask our friends if they know someone over there, so that we could meet. In Kigoma and Kilomasoko, we have totally failed to find any connections. That's why the work was hard over there. And the most interesting foundation of mutual trust is to know where the person lives. Because Tanzanians believe that if somebody does something bad, and let's say the victim comes to his or her home, tells about it to the family, neighbors, so the whole district will know, and reputation will be totally ruined. So it's very important to know where you live. And about the respect, there are some ways of paying respect in the society. It is, first of all, it is very important to greet people in the street and answer their greetings. Each interaction should start with the question, how are you, what's up? There are a lot of local variations of this phrase. And there is a special respectful way of greeting people of older age and higher status. And answering to such greetings, it's shikamo to elders, and the answer is marahaba. And each time we have a meal, the food is for everyone sitting on at the table, laws of hospitality. And even if you want to buy something in the shop, in Swahili, the phrase should start with the phrase, I'm asking you for naomba. It's in Swahili. And that is the Tanzanian way, because in Kenya, it's different. The Kenyans say, why you need to ask? You're paying for it. Give me, that's all. Tanzanians are different. They're polite. And you may speak English, of course. If you do not ignore greetings and other strange questions, it's okay. Even if you forget about Shikama Marahaba issue, because you're the guest of the country. But the more you try to speak Swahili, the more you're talking to people everywhere, the better reputation you get. And it is very helpful for the study and for comfortable life in Tanzania in all the aspects. Prices, security, availability of goods and people, and so on. And the good thing for us is that having white friends, wazungu they call it, is considered prestigious. But the bad thing is that white people are believed to have money. So a lot of Tanzanians would try to take an advantage. And ranging from, I need to feed my kids, sister support my business, to you must give us money as an excuse for colonialism and slave trade. However, Russia has never taken part in both of these historical processes, not in colonial times, not in the slave trade. And regarding this issue, while working in poor neighborhoods, well, Swahili, we've shown you already, you shouldn't demonstrate your balance. No last iPhone in your hands, no golden chains on your neck, no Dolce & Gabbana clothes or what is fancy today. It's like you're asking to be robbed. Yes, and one of the tricky issues is to explain what you're actually doing and what is the purpose. If you talk to other scholars or even students, it is not a problem. But if you go for poor and uneducated guys, they don't know what is an academic research. Sometimes I say that I'm writing a book for Russian tourists, actually, and I want to know the picture of real life, how people do live. And even dealing with the official, especially some local police, is also sometimes an issue. They also don't know about these studies, academic, and the permissions make them puzzled. So it's better to say that you're just a very interested tourist. That's all. Tourists are fine. Tourists bring money to the country. If you're a tourist, cool, everything's fine. And I already mentioned that Tanzanians are very communicative, though there is huge difference between men and women, because the generalized Tanzanian culture is patriarchal. So most often women were responsible for housekeeping and raising kids. They didn't get education or work because they were supposed to get married. And that was the only way to improve social status. Since, I think, 1970, the situation began to change. Women were running away from their husbands to the cities, earning money from selling food, for example. And today, of course, there are educated women working. Even the president of the country is woman right now, Mama Samia. So, but still, the culture hasn't disappeared. And thus, there is a disproportion among employed workers, men and women. It is still high. So while men with any level of education, any occupation or even jobless, tend to go out a lot, being engaged in various activities for business or for fun, women still feel left behind. So many of them are not much exposed to leave their home, neighborhood, to go to parties, to visit the city center, talk to strangers, so on. And of course, it depends on particular people and the topic of research. Yes, and traditions, families, but in general, men are much more accessible, say like this. And one more specific feature, as I already mentioned, there are 120 tribes in Tanzania, and all of them have their own tribal languages with their linguistic norms of pronunciation. And thus, they tend to transfer the roots of pronunciation of their ethnic language to English and Swahili. So sometimes you don't really understand from the first time that the guy is speaking English, because they change the letters and so on, all these interesting matters. And also speaking about tribal or regional origin of the person. For mainland citizens, this part of self-identification is very important. Yeah. Though many of them say, in accordance to the ideology planted by the first president, Mwalimu Nyerere, that tribes are not important. All Tanzanians are united. People respect each other, regardless of tribe or religion. They speak one language and mix all together. All of these statements are absolutely true. But at the same time, any person from the mainland can instantly recall his tribe and may say, and maybe even the tribes of his parents, if he's from the mixed family. And he is usually, or he or she, might even know the greetings in his ethnic language and can always say from where are they coming historically, from which region. That's it. And they do keep in touch with their fellow tribesmen and countrymen, even in the metropolis. If they meet each other, and greeting a person in his or her tribal language is considered especially pleasing. And in these regions inhabited mainly by one or few tribes, people still speak their ethnic languages apart from Swahili, and they do maintain their people's oral tradition. They're like we faced it in Tabora, which is inhabited by Nyamese people. And we've never visited Dodoma, the land of Bogo people, but we met a lot of them. They all kept their language and traditions very carefully. And today, even in big cities, some people, about 30, tend to get interested in tribal issues. They may visit their home village, start learning language, traditions, and oral history. That is speaking of the fading languages issue, yes? So now I face it there are a lot of people who start getting interested. And so they even start learning their languages. And they start speaking them, at least between their fellow tribesmen. And tribes like Maasai, Datoga, and Hadzabe are still perceived as prestigious because they maintain their traditional culture. And such perception is not true for everyone, but it persists. And now we'll go to the other part of the country, Valentine.
I wanted to say okay, a little bit about this picture. So here you can see the first president, my colleague has already said, and this is sculpture called Moja, unity, which also symbolizes unity of all tribes in Tanzania. And here it's common on the streets. You can see pictures of first president, and even you go administrative building, you can see side by side photo of new president and okay. So okay. Yeah, so while my colleagues were working on mainland, I was working on Zanzibar, archipelago, which is mostly Muslim islands, so two major islands, Zanzibar and Pemba. And before revolution of 1964, Zanzibar was independent state. So in working process, there are a lot of differences because this island was Muslim and it was independent. So people still, they don't think about themselves as part of Tanzania. They mostly think about themselves as Zanzibarians, and some of them, they claim Zanzibar should be, yes, independent state now. So almost all aspects which my colleague mentioned work in Zanzibar and Pemba Islands. So it's better not to pay respondents. It's better not to show your clothes, your money, so your status. So you should be, you should wear simple clothes, and because of culture, you shouldn't wear some open outfits. So you should be covering your shoulders, your legs, your hands, your breast. It's important. Not so important on Zanzibar because it's mainly tourist island, and people are very with that now. But on Pemba Island, which is more closed and conservative, it's better not to. It's better to follow the tradition in politics. And before going to Pemba Island, we ask our friends how is better to, which clothes is better to wear, and most of our clothes were unsuitable. So I said, this. So on Zanzibar, as well as Pemba, people don't use word tribe or kabila because they see themselves as Zanzibarians. So they think that they're Zanzibar nation. And usually we skip this question, and we use this only when the person tells that his or her originating from mainland. Also, while you work on Zanzibar or Pemba, you should keep in mind Muslim prayer schedule, because people don't like when you disturb them at the time. And on Pemba, after 4 p.m., everybody are going to home. So it's better to finish your work before. And on both islands, difficult to collect interviews on some topics which is still politicized. It's about Zanzibar revolution. It's really hard because people come to whisper or just refuse to answer these questions. And also some people find dangerous questions about interrelations and intercompetition. So working on this islands on Zanzibar is easier because it's a lot of people work in tourist industries. They're common with white people, with researchers and so on. And they know English. Even old people, they know well because of colonial education. But in Pemba, situation is different. They don't know English at all. They speak Swahili, but it's different. It's another dialect which we can't understand when we learn just standard Swahili. So it's more tricky to work on Pemba Islands, and you should have assistance from somebody who are local. But on Zanzibar, you can work by yourself. Not a problem. Just some views on Cheki and city on environment. This is also mosque. And this view of the environment is very fantastic. It's nice. Sana will show you more photos.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we just left some photos left. This is the view of Dar es Salaam from the bay. See, the city is built in very different style. Fortunately, I don't have a good picture of Swahili, but you can see that there are no streets. House that moves. So that's it. And this is the Askari Monument. Also in Dar es Salaam, this is a monument, memorial to African soldiers who fought against German army during the First World War. One of the cathedrals also famous is St. Joseph's, yes. Yeah, it's a view of Dar es Salaam city center from another shore. Nice. And these are the guys on boats. Again, some Swahili, I guess it's not the main. Yeah, again, the picture of Mandrasa. And this is Mandrasa nowadays. Has become a little bit better. Even some, this is another Swahili, which is famous, but I found it's a nice neighborhood, by the way. It's Yu.V.Knorozova Palange. I like the color of soil. Also, a really good there in the rain. Yeah. See, even here, over there, there's mountains of rubbish. Not as better than Mandrasa, but still there are awesome. And then these are wonderful bridges, I think. Wonderful. Yeah, and this is Bagamoy. It's the German Boma. Because Bagamoy used to be the German capital before the Dar es Salaam. So it's just Rasta Park in Bagamoy. Yeah, and this is German Boma in Newfoundland. It's still in very good condition and notable. And this is the view of harbor in Newfoundland. Yep. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
About that, but what it said, so it said the convention of these people or they think about what can you go and answer what.
As I told you, Lily, it depends on the language. If we speak in Swahili, they call it kabila. but it's the direct translation of the word tribe which they use in English. So you can hear the expression ethnic origin, but maybe for only some educated people. So that's how they call it. That's their own definition. In which official paper, I mean? No, no.
It was in India, official response to tribes. It's an official call. Very important to speak about tribes and so on. And then it's very interesting how to speak about the system officially.
Actually, if we go for the official papers, tribes are not mentioned. It was according to constitution, because as we already said, Mwalimu Nyerere wanted to build a single nation. So he said that we should get stuck to Tanzanian, that you're Tanzanian, you're not a Zama or Bobo or whatever, but still they are left there. And so there is no, tribes are not mentioned in documents, yes, and even the religions also, because they didn't want to have this problems between people of different origins or different religions. And it has really worked out. So usually it's not spoken. Maybe, I don't know, I was looking for any information, but so far I didn't find this even in the news when it's stated that a person was of this or that tribe. No, it's just, well, maybe if it's some specific issue. But officially it's not mentioned as, and even as people say, it's not important, but it is important. Sure. So officially, it's even not mentioned in general, like this.
That's the question. I understand that your presentation was related to the methods of not people. But still, because you said you asked nothing, you asked question, you asked many, we're looking for age. It must be that you're asking for, and that what is the short question?
A lot of things. So we studied memory and Arabic circulation in the 18th century. I do research around my thing about international relations because it's questions are priority. We research about historical memory about colonialism, British and German, and now this new project.
Yeah, it's about the nation building. So each time we have a new topic of research, each time we have different questionnaire, of course, and even the research on slave trade we've been conducting it for 5 years. So we even changed the question list several times because we understood that, oh, we need to go deeper in this subject, or we need to, we even found our previous respondents because we didn't ask them one important thing, just to ask them couple of questions which we didn't think of before, because it's not always easy just to imagine everything when it comes out during the research. Say, oh my God, I should have been asking about it all the time. Yes, and I'm working in the slums, and I'm making research about mutual help groups, so it's quite different. It's different, and it's different that I can't interview anybody. They need to be to know the subject or be the participant of some of these groups. That's it. So each time it's different, and the methods are different, and the questionnaires are different, and the sample is different, of course, because while Valentine is working on interconfessional relations, of course, she needs all the types of Christians which are there in Ireland and Muslims both. So it's always flexible. It really depends on particular study.
You say you mentioned questionnaire many times, but at the same time you said the questionnaire is about the best thing to suggest people. You mean only just writing, like, or you have structured interviews.
Yes, interviews. Yes, I mean interviews.
Working with the data after that, how you work with this structured interview.
Transcription, analysis, so on. As usual, sometimes some statistics, if it's something countable, like how many people of this or that background answer this or the middle or that. If it is a yes, no question. Okay, something like this. So all the methods. Mm-hmm.
The interesting question is, so officially there's only one transaction. Yes. One is the official legal status of the languages. Are they somehow recognized as minority languages? Or they are not just saying that some of the communities are constituted of the idea that they are dialects. Or is there any legal recognition of local languages?
I would say there is, but they do exist, but this topic is not widely discussed. So any time you go to some officials, they would say, no tribes. Where are you from? From Kilimanjaro. Chaga. Yes, Chaga. You know Chaga people. You don't have tribes. Oh, it is not important. So it works like this. So it's not mentioned officially. The tribes, the religions, everything which can differentiate people and, break the nation, for example, let's say like this. But it is all there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll continue on the same topic. Some decades ago, there was this figure that Swahili was spoken by 50 million people more, not only in Tanzania, but in neighboring countries. There were very few people for whom Swahili was actually the first language. And at the same time, I've heard that it's growing. It's basically gradually changing. So there are now more people whom Swahili is the first language of their country. Correct? But do you know the numbers?
Oh, I think I can't recall the numbers right now because also the statistics, it's not official. So there are some numbers from some NGOs and so on. I'm afraid I can't tell you the exact numbers right now. I don't remember, but this is true. Especially this is true for the big cities because really a lot of people go to big cities to find a better life. Yes, to have this opportunity of work, education, whatever, and really people mix a lot because there's every tribe you can find in the city, and their children already speak mostly only Swahili. It also comes to the educational system because, okay, Swahili is the language of the primary school, and since the secondary, it's English. But the local languages, they are not taught in school. And so some people I was discussing this matter with, they told me that my children won't know my tribal language. We never visited our grandparents there in the village, and from where they can learn it. No, and why would they need it? We live in the city. They need English. Yeah, English. Swahili, we speak all. We all speak Swahili. So that's it. And the situation is like this, but it is different in these regions where there are some, not mono-ethnic, but mostly one tribe. They still speak.
It's really African language, not European one. But it's grows and expands and irritates all the languages. Disseminates maybe literature written in local languages or some radio programs or something like this is not welcome.
No, there is no literature in local languages. Well, I met just one guy who was writing a book about the history of Quera tribe. Unfortunately, he has died not long ago, but I'm still looking for an opportunity to get this work published. But this is rarely. So the tribal languages, it's for oral tradition and customs. But these customs sometimes are even recalled in the cities because in that wonderful Manguesa neighborhood, I've taken part in one Quera holiday because they have their Quera community, not very big, but they met each other, say, we're from one region, we're from one tribe. So it really happens. So traditions are alive. And even one of my respondents said that in Bagamoyo, there is an arts college, very famous one, and there they study the local dances, the traditional dances. And so it's another way of, resurrecting the traditional cultures, the tribal ones. So I wouldn't say it's totally fading away, that Swahili has conquered everything. Not really. Some of them do, of course, if there are very few speakers and maybe old speakers, okay, and all their children left to big cities, okay, that's it's normal process. But in general, yes, all these things are kept.
By the natural law, they have to offer a language in the but they don't have to you have language to get a set salary. If I get things on the weekend, the language salary, the language system doesn't work, and that's two things. So when we did our survey, the first request material part of it. There's some correct knowledge you have very little self-control inside the design of project. You have really hard time doing this. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody. Thank you very much.